Folks, it's been 6 months, can't believe it, right? 6 months since COP26 in Glasgow. And I'm sure you know the aim of COP26 was to keep 1.5 degrees alive. And that is to ensure that the world remains committed to preventing global heating from exceeding more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Well, this session, folks, will bring together sustainability and net zero examples and case studies of collaboration and innovation from Dr Roddy Yarr. Dr Roddy Yarr, the Executive Lead for Sustainability at University of Strathclyde. Roddy is a sustainability expert who is responsible for the development and delivery of climate change and social responsibility initiatives that address the university's response to net zero and sustainability issues across all of its operational assets in West Central Scotland, and that's pretty extensive, folks. He's working with local, regional government, industry, private sector, community, third sector and academic colleagues on a wide range of initiatives. He advises a wide range of stakeholders and sits on a quite impressive number of bodies to share his knowledge, to share his experience and his passion for the subject. I'm going to hand over to Roddy now so we can hear what Roddy has to say on keeping 1.5 alive. Roddy.
Thank you, Stephen, and I could probably stop there because you've introduced me very well, and yeah, it's nice to be here and to share this virtual platform with colleagues. So yeah, I've got half an hour to try and tell you about the work that we're doing at the university and give you some examples to try and make this really quite scary proposition a bit more real and let you see what action we can all take and the action that we're working on with partners across the city region. So I'll share my screen, and please do ask questions in the chat, and I'll try and answer them afterwards. I'll just get this to work. Now, somebody needs to tell me that they can see the cover slide, which is glorious Technicolor.
We've got that, Roddy. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, excellent. So we're off to a good start. That's helpful. Yeah, so my name's Roddy Yarr. I work at the University of Strathclyde. I've been at Strathclyde for 6 years, previously at a previous university at St Andrews. Before that, I worked in private sector and public sector roles. I'm a geologist. I've been working on this in this area most of my career, I have to say. I was the first environmental officer for British Coal Opencast, so remember that industry we used to have in Scotland. Dirty industry, lots to do, and so on. So yeah, I'm passionate about what I do. I try and spread that passion to everyone. So hopefully this will help you see what we're doing today. I thought, I suppose before we get into the funding and so forth, we've basically got a vision here that we're trying to roll out with others, and I think that's the themes we're going to talk about today are very much around collaboration, building scale, building capacity to act, deploying finance into this space because it needs funding, providing innovation, new ideas, new ways of doing things, and really ultimately mobilising action. So it's really important that the policy and the funding horizon supports all of this. And it does. That's the good news, to a greater or lesser degree, depending on your point of view. There is a lot of policy coming forward. Stephen mentioned COP26 as a coming together of a lot of that policy and ambition. But of course, we've got to deliver that. And that's really the challenge here is the inertia that we need to build here and get through. It needs to support from policymakers and actors such as yourselves. Scotland Excel does fantastic work, and I work very closely with my supply chain procurement colleagues at the university and in the public sector through, for instance, APUC. So we're supportive of and thankful for the work that you do, but we really need that policy horizon. So the bottom 2 points are probably worth focusing on: levelling up funding and shared prosperity funding. These are the big ticket funding packages that are coming forward for local authorities and for actors in and work in and around the city region. So I'll say a bit more about that going forward. But you can see that this is a letter on the right from Rishi Sunak his civil servant elements of the UK Infrastructure Bank, because a lot of this is about infrastructure, deploying infrastructure assets that enable some of this change across city and region, which is where we focus. We've got operating assets across all of West Central Scotland, as Stephen was saying. So yeah, so really important that we get the funding horizon in place. At the university, we've got a city centre campus. We have a number of other research and conference venues across the city region. And we've been at this sustainability work for a number of years. As you can see, there's sort of a broad timeline with some key elements laid across it. District heating we've put in 2018. When the climate emergency was declared in 2019, we were well placed to start to bring together a lot of the work we had done already with some of the ideas we've got, and start to make that move towards net zero and a more sustainable city and region. So I guess that's been really helpful to help everybody get coherently around that kind of vision that we've got, which we'll talk about in a few minutes' time. And yeah, I think at the heart of this slide in 2017, the community benefits, let's not forget this is about people. And I know that Scotland Excel and our procurement colleagues are very mindful of community benefits as being a requirement of the Procurement Reform Scotland Act, but B, this is about people. You know, that's the kind of fundamental element of the university as a socially inclusive university. So we reflect that in our sustainability practices. Some of the considerations I think about a lot are the scale and speed of delivery that we need. We need a shared ambition, but we need development funding to bring forward all of these projects that we're working on. And that is a challenge for us all, I think. And then you get into capital funding of the actual infrastructure and the assets, decarbonising our estate. That's a massive task, you know, to get our state into a much more fabric-first approach so we can transition away from fossil fuels into other forms of heating and power. The supply chain, absolutely vital. The pipeline of projects has to be delivered, so that all requires a supply chain. It requires skills, it requires access to materials, people to do the work. And then you've got operational impact of works. This is on the left, the district heating scheme at the university, which I was the project sponsor for. 3.5 kilometres of pipework in dense urban setting, challenging work, but we can do it. But we have operational impacts to deal with. And then overlaying all of this, of course, is the governance and the strategic imperative to make it happen. The political will has to be there. And the green print for investment that you see at the bottom is a really strong signal from Glasgow that we're serious about doing this. And one of our projects is in that green print for investment, the Climate Neutral Innovation District. So these are sort of considerations I think about all the time. In terms of where universities can play into this space, we are enablers. We are large estates. We are anchor at heat and power loads. We're vested in our community, so our covenant is strong. We've got good ideas. We've got good links to community and industry and to public sector and national government. But we also know how to deliver large infrastructure projects. We're in the throes of just completing our £1 billion campus. Similar process at Glasgow University and their £1 billion plus campus. So we know how to do this stuff. And that's really helpful and important. Some examples from the university first before we go into the wider perspective. I think one of our most recently opened buildings, the Learning and Teaching Building, a £61 million capital investment project, was really an example of reuse of 2 buildings, putting 2 buildings into one to create a much more purposeful space for our students. And thinking about repurposing our buildings is going to be at the core of our estate plans and development plans across city and region. 80% of our assets are already in place and will be in place. So we need to decarbonise those assets and make them much more resilient to the changing climate and more intense rainfall, overheating. So this is one example at the university where we took 2 buildings. The latter one here was the former Colville building. People might remember that. It didn't look like that at all, but we've repurposed it, took it back to the shell and core. We didn't build new, we repurposed it, and that saved us significant emissions on our embodied carbon footprint and provided a meaningful space for our students. to now occupy. Our Students' Union is in here. There's all sorts of flexible learning spaces in here. And we've kept the listed building, which is the architecture building here. So really, that's kind of one example of how we can actually make a change without building new and reap some benefits from it. Of course, we've done our district heating scheme. Delivering solutions are challenging. It does have operational impacts, and that's something that we have to be always mindful at the university in particular, keeping access for students to learn and do their research, but also enable the transition to happen. In our new TIC zone development, this is going to be our first passive house building that we're building next to the existing TIC building here. You might be familiar with that on George Street in Glasgow. So this new development here on the right is a new build, and one might say, why are you building new? But we need purpose-built research space for our innovation clusters that we're bringing into the Innovation District in Glasgow. So at least we're making that building Passive House certified and also Well Building certified and much more responsive to the changing climate. And that's really a first for us, and we think that'll be a first at this scale in terms of 11,000 square metres of highly serviced research space in the centre of Glasgow. On-site renewables, we're fitting them. We're doing as much as we can to deploy PV onto our roof. And more we're looking at bio-solar roofs. So can we put green roofs below the PV panels on all of our flat roofs? And I think that's something that we're keen to do more of with the city as best we can. In terms of urban realm and placemaking, yes, again, we think that's really important, and our heart of the campus, re-landscaping and pedestrianisation of streets in the very heart of the campus at Rotten Row Gardens is about to kick off at the end of this year, and that will repurpose that event space into a much more green, community-focused space, student-focused space, less about the car and vans and lorries, which won't be allowed into this space, and more about people and putting people first, as I say, a hugely important aspect. Community benefits, we have adopted our community benefit strategy in 2017, working with our procurement colleagues. And this is our response. We call it the Strathclyde Commitment, and it's now layered across all of our major capital projects. And that means that, for instance, the district heating scheme that we put in delivered apprenticeships, internships, graduate placements, working with our local community. And now what we do as a routine is we do a socio-economic impact assessment of all of our capital projects, just to understand the benefit, both in economic terms and social impact terms, of our capital works. And that's now an important discipline that we lay out across all of our capital projects. So I think that's kind of what we've been doing at the university, but we can't do this on our own. We have to collaborate at scale. And I think this is where we get to the vision that we've got to create climate neutral districts in partnership with our colleagues across the region. And this is our climate neutral districts vision, an award-winning vision. Although we've not done anything in terms of capital works yet, just building that vision, building that kind of shared ambition has been challenging, but also rewarding, because we've had reciprocation from our colleagues who said, yeah, that's a good idea, let's get behind it. So that's really helpful, and it gives me a lot of hope, actually, that we can do this at scale across all of our operating areas. So the vision at the moment and our approach to it is we have 10 projects. We use what's called a whole systems approach. So instead of working in silos on energy in one basket, transport in another, climate resilience in another, we try and bring all of those together, along with placemaking and people and well-being. So that's kind of the concept of a whole system. Try and think about where the interdependencies are, where the linkages are between all the different elements that we're all working on really busily, but not doing them in isolation, trying to bring the whole concept together. And developing these projects, so really deploying funding, revenue funding, consulting fees, if you like, to get these projects off the ground, because that's a really key part. As I said earlier, we need to invest to really get the ambition going. So we've invested in the Climate Neutral Innovation District, probably about $500,000 consultancy fees last year, and just building up this pipeline of projects. Understanding the cost, what the emissions reduction can be, how resiliency can be delivered, trying to get ahead, trying to program, because this is the decade of change, so we've not got long left, 8 years to really make this stuff happen. And really importantly, aligning with city and region policies and plans, trying to flex existing planned projects that are happening in the city and the region. Glasgow Metro, for instance, the Avenues project in Glasgow, the work of Climate Ready Clyde, and really trying to align ourselves with that to enact these projects ultimately and get the funding in place. And then ultimately, I guess, at the end of towards the end of the projects is managing any net emissions. What's left over? How do we deal with that? So we're working hard with the Clyde Climate Forest to try and make sure that we're understanding what that project's bringing forward and whether that's something that we can tap into in terms of managing net emissions through sequestration, for instance, and tree planting, more green roofs and green walls in the city, for instance. So really, it's 100% renewable heat, power, transport, adaptation and well-being plan for a community. A bit of a mouthful, but I think you can see the concept there. And as I say, this is already starting to be included in the city region's investment prospectus, which is encouraging. So a climate neutral district, I'll just give you, this is one example. This is the Glasgow City Innovation District, right in the heart of Glasgow city centre. You've got the River Clyde here. You've got High Street, the original birthplace of Glasgow. You've got the university, of course. You've got Merchant City. You have residential areas all around the area. Areas with SIMD issues, which need affordable heat. And that's a huge imperative for the Scottish Government and for, in this case, Glasgow City Council. You've got industry. You've got the distillery, the Strathclyde distillery here. You've got Paul Madee, the waste energy plant down in the south side, close by, within touching distance, I think. And you've got development going on in this city centre zone. And this is an innovation zone. So university in partnership with Scottish Enterprise, Skills Development Scotland, Glasgow Chamber, an investment zone. So how can we make that climate neutral? That's really the vision that I'm working on and leading with colleagues to deliver this within the heart of the city centre. Looking away from the city, you'll be glad to know this isn't just about Glasgow City. This is one of our developments down at the airport in Renfrewshire. But another good example, because this is actually being constructed at the moment, and it'll be our first energy carbon neutral. It won't be climate neutral because we kind of missed the boat to a greater degree on that one, but it'll absolutely be energy carbon neutral. So this 10,000 square metre digital factory of the future being built by the university is not going to have any gas connection. So this is completely off grid in that sense. But what it will do is take waste heat from the local sewage treatment works, this is the outfall here at Lay Park Sewage Treatment Works, which serves Paisley. Working with Renfrewshire Council and Scottish Water and their contractors to install an ambient heat loop, a 3.5 kilometre heating loop, which has warm water in it, which when it gets to the building goes through a heat pump, and that will provide the heat for that building. No gas connection, as I say. And on the roof of that, we're installing a significantly large 800 kilowatt rooftop solar PV array, which will handle the bulk of the electrical connection. So, and using mains electricity still, so we'll still be connected to the grid, but we'll be doing as much as we can to generate our own heat and power on site locally. So we generate energy locally, we use the natural resources that we've got, and we use that energy locally as well. And I think that's a model that we should all be thinking about. How can we, in public sector, do more for ourselves so we don't necessarily have to draw energy from other forms that are perhaps out with our control? It maybe speaks to energy crisis. It maybe speaks to resilience and power supply. So all of that agenda is coming forward now, and that will be opening at the end of the summertime down at the airport in Renfrewshire Council. So another good example of partnership with government funding, Scottish Water's ambition, Renfrewshire Council's ambition, and the university stepping up, I guess, to sign a heat supply agreement that enabled this to happen. So the Climate Neutral Innovation District, back to Glasgow, you're sort of wondering perhaps what on earth all of this is, but these are some of the numbers to try and let you see what the nature of the reduction would be in terms of carbon terms. By bringing heat from the Clyde, this is the River Clyde and the weir at the Albert Bridge, we can provide heat into the zone, and we can also bring power into that zone as well. And we start to build a pipework network, a district heating network. We start to think about resiliency by tree planting. We think about roof-mounted solar PV within the district. This is the potential that's available there. So again, we can start to generate our own energy and use the energy from the natural resources, but also couple that with more tree planting, better spaces, more resiliency. Perhaps replumbing, rewiring our city centre through High Street. Perhaps High Street acts as a climate corridor in that sense. It starts to distribute these services, low, affordable heat and power into the city centre zone. So that's the vision, and it's hugely ambitious, as I think you can probably appreciate. But it has to be done. I think there's no other way around this. That's the nature of this. So it's challenging. But I think having a vision helps people to perhaps coalesce around something. And then the feasibility work that we've done shows that this is the art of the possible. The heat is there in the River Clyde, but we just now have to pivot towards making it happen and fundamentally work with our communities to enable that change to happen. And that's why the numbers are getting quite big. It starts at 210 million, but it's probably looking more like 500 million at the moment. So what does it actually look like for High Street, which is, as I say, the original birthplace of Glasgow, but very car-centric, not very green. What could that look like with district heating and climate services below the ground? Much more green kind of infrastructure, more space for people, more space for cycling, to active travel, and not excluding vehicular transport, but controlling it more. I think that's the idea and the aims and the ambitions. Much more green space, places to sit. Where do you sit on this street? How do you move along the street if you have access issues? These are all important things we need to think about. And this is a hugely important street for Glasgow. It's in the low emission zone. So we're moving towards better air quality and improved space, but we also need to think about scalar heat and power as we do this. The team that we've worked with, again, this is hugely collaborative. Design team on the left and all of the stakeholders that form the steering group on the right. So again, lots of communication going on, lots of kind of capacity building at the same time as moving the agenda forward here. All the technical work to inform the data that allows us to be comfortable and an investor to be comfortable about knowing that their investment is going to be de-risked. Who will take the heat? Who will sign up to a heat supply agreement? The Wheatley Group in terms of housing, the university, the hospital, big heat users, big anchor loads. This is sort of the vision that we need to start to deliver here. A third example, I think, is where we've really started to deploy our student groups into this space. And this is an example of from the Highlands. PNDC we're great at acronyms at the university, but this is the Power Networks Demonstration Centre. And our research students and research employees basically work on power grids and how to decarbonize the grid system. In this particular example, it's taking access to grid data and knowing where grid issues are or are not within the Highlands to create better connectivity for electric vehicle charging. So communities who aren't connected can be connected through car clubs, through having access to EV charging, and making sure that the grid numbers match up with the cost of that installation, and working with colleagues and stakeholders to actually deploy EV charging to fill the connectivity gaps. So a really important piece where we've got expertise in grid and how to manage grid aspects, and then deploying that through working with the HyTrans colleagues and actually enabling that to be procured and deployed across that city region. So early days, but again, another great example of where we're working with distribution network operators, power companies, communities, and stakeholders to really work out how we can add value to a community issue around connectivity in the Highlands. So I think that's my third example. Last two slides, I think, here, but I'm sure we're all aware of the green recovery opportunities that sustainability and climate action actually provides in terms of moving towards filling the skills gap, which is a real gap in this area. Providing local jobs, providing that green investment, these are all opportunities to pivot more towards a different kind of growth. So when we talk about growth all the time, what I'm espousing is that we grow into this area as a priority over and above many other areas, because this actually helps society to move forward and tackles the 1.5 issue. And it is about infrastructure, construction, new and retrofit, deploying new technologies, which aren't new, but they're new for us and they're not familiar for us. Heat pumps, for instance. Rainwater attenuation, natural systems, using more natural systems, not the hard systems that we're used to. Tree planting at scale, green walls, green roofs. These are important devices and interventions that actually improve our space and our spaces where people live and work and operate. And decentralized energy systems, generating more of our own energy so we have more resilience in that respect. And really just creating better places around urban realm and rural realm as well. So conclusions, yeah, I think we would counsel that a whole systems approach is the way forward, because it builds scale, it builds capacity, and it has to be delivered across the whole piece. We need to provide clear signals and leadership, and I think that's what we're trying to do within the work that we're doing. And the sector, public sector, needs to be clear on what its commitments are and signal to people that this is what we're doing. In the university sector, the state's development has to be matched to the climate targets that we've got. We need more renewables. We need to adapt. We can't just forget about adaptation because it's locked in already. So we have to manage that. At the university and our communities, we want to get more activity for our students in deploying this, taking their learning and actually helping to work with local authorities and procurement organisations such as Scotland Excel to really help move this and shift the dial. Collaboration, of course, absolutely fundamental to this. We all need to talk and communicate and build that collective vision to get the pipeline going and then actually get the funding in place and get the investment to happen. And I think that should be a central policy thread of public sector and private sector ambition. Colleagues, I think that's my final slide, and I'll stop sharing now and hopefully I've not run over too long, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Roddy, that was fantastic. Really, really interesting. Some really big numbers there, but actually I really liked some of your examples. What we're going to do next, Roddy, I know you've got a hard, fast appointment next as well, so I've got a note of the questions. We have got some questions, but I thought what we could do is maybe if we could take them offline with you and we'll put them online afterwards. What we're going to do now is we're just about immediately to start a workshop to talk about how can we find solutions to the very things that you've talked about now. So Roddy, thank you very much for what you've said. Apologies we couldn't get those questions to you, but we will get them offline and we'll get them answered, hopefully in the coming days. So Roddy, thank you very much. And folks, you all each have your appointments, so we're going to break into work groups now, and we're going to talk about some of the topics that Roddy's just highlighted. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.